Some retro video games do not stand the test of time, and that is a fact. Some games were good for their time, but as time moves on, they do start to become a little stale. Sure, you can still have fun with them, but if we're going to be honest with ourselves, you can not only see how the technology is advanced, but the gameplay mechanics too. In my opinion, this is why the golden age of arcade gaming is so fondly remembered. For every 100 forgettable or at best, not bad arcade games that there were, you had a select few that truly did stand the test of time. Games such as Pac-Man, Space Invaders and Donkey Kong, you hear about them all the time, and that's because, quite simply, they are perfect games. Not many games can hold that perfect badge of honour, especially in the arcade space, where every new popular game was ripped off by quite literally everyone. But all of the games mentioned, plus a few more from this era, are quite literally perfect. Games that are as good for newcomers back then as they are now, 40 to 50 years later. And if you ask me, one of the absolute best from this generation was BurgerTime. A game that wasn't going for a space theme or an army theme, a game that was trying to be its own thing. Well, for the most part at least. Sure, it might have taken inspiration from what was popular a year prior, but it did so with so much style and new mechanics that it became a fan favourite for all who played it way back then and who still enjoy its simple yet perfectly executed gameplay over 40 years later. But that isn't the full story. When a game as brilliantly executed as BurgerTime gets made, not only do we get endless amounts of rip-offs, but a whole heap of sequels and ports too. And today, we're going to be going back to the beginning to cover them all. So, join me as we take a look at the complete history of BurgerTime, where we will explore its inspiration, what came after it, what console loved it the most, and find out what the hell happened to the franchise in BurgerTime, the complete history. Welcome to Slope's Game Room. The year is 1982 and Data East was on a roll, going up against companies such as Sega and Taito. They had finally started to make their mark. One of the ways they did this was by releasing the Data East Corporation cassette system, more commonly known as the Deco cassette system, in 1979. It was the first ever standardised arcade system that allowed the owner to switch the games found within using cassette tapes. It wasn't exactly a reliable system when compared to other standalone arcade systems, but it was significantly cheaper. After purchasing the system itself, arcade owners would then need to buy a new game that would come in a small orange packet not looking too dissimilar to a large box of crayons. Inside, the owner would find a small cassette tape similar to those found inside of an answering machine. They would then insert the tape into the arcade cabinet, insert a unique small key module which was done to prevent piracy, replace the artwork and insert a small plastic joystick stopper in case the game only required certain movements. Every time an arcade would open up in the morning, they would need to load this game up this exact way, very similar to how cassettes were loaded on home computer systems. Most games released at this time were nothing more than clones of varying levels of quality. I mean, everyone was doing this back then, and Data East was no different. At least now, arcade owners could get a clone of Space Invaders at a fraction of the cost. However, what's far more interesting in retrospect is that these cheaper to produce and cheaper to purchase games not only allowed the company to compete with the big boys like Sega, Taito, Namco, but they also were able to test the waters and see if these games would work if they were created as standalone arcade machines. Lock and Chase was one of the earliest examples of a Deco game doing well enough to get its own arcade machine and multiple home conversions. A Pac-Man styled maze game with a cops and robbers twist, allowing you to trap the coppers chasing you by closing the shutters behind you as you ran away. Heck, these little coloured policemen would chase you around the maze, very similar to the ghosts in Pac-Man. They even had their own names and characteristics. You had Silly, Smarty, Scaredy, and Stiffy. There are plenty of other examples of both forgettable and exceptional titles among the 48 games released for the Deco, but without a doubt it was Hamburger that was by far the most popular. A game where you control Peter Pepper, a chef running and climbing around a single screen platform and ladder filled stage, trying your best to trample across the top of several layers of a burger, which forces them to fall down a level, hopefully in a domino fashion, to eventually form a complete meal at the bottom of the screen. Released only 1 year after the wildly successful Donkey Kong, the creation and inspiration behind BurgerTime may seem obvious. But sadly, there really isn't much concrete evidence that we have for its development. From my research, the name that comes up the most is Akio Nakamura, a guy that worked on Lock and Chase apparently, and a guy who was one day eating a burger and thought to himself, I wonder how you would make one of these things, and then just made a game based on that. And again, Donkey Kong was doing crazy numbers the year before, so it's easy to see the connection. A recipe for success, if you will. The only problem with this research is that there's just simply no way of proving it. Japanese development houses were notorious for hiding their developers' names in fear of rival studios headhunting their staff. So take the name Akio Nakamura with a lethal-sized grain of salt. Just like the salt that Peter Pepper launches at his enemies. Well, actually it's pepper, but you know, I needed that transition. Yep, pepper is your only means of attack towards Mr. Hot Dog, Mr. Pickle, and Mr. Egg. And unless you pick up more, you only have 5 shakes at your disposal to temporarily stun them. So you'll not want to use this unless it's really, really needed. And it will be, as these enemies have a great knack of chasing you and cornering you, especially on the later stages in this game. Thankfully, the more you play it, the more you realise that there really is quite a lot more to this game than meets the eye. Skilled players are able to squish their enemies beneath the falling ingredients, and pro players wait until the very last second before moving off a trampled piece of food, resulting in the enemy falling down with said ingredient even further than one without an enemy on top. Doing all of this and bouncing multiple ingredients off each other results in a game that is full to the brim with unique combinations. And even though the original only had 6 different looping stages, when you master these tactics you have one of the more unique single screen platformers of the generation. And as for the name Hamburger, well, that obviously got changed to BurgerTime when the game was licensed to Midway for distribution in the States. This was done to obviously get around the tough time the company would have licensing a game with such a generic name. And it didn't take long for Japan to follow suit. It just goes to show a good name can really spice things up. Off the back of the success of BurgerTime, not only did we get this standalone arcade cabinet, but we got way more ports than you could possibly imagine. The NES, for instance, had 2 releases, one by Namco and another by Data East themselves for the Famicom Disk System, although both are completely identical. These versions are for the most part perfect, although gamers will need to take some extra time getting used to moving off and on the ladders similar to the arcade original. With that said, it does seem to be a tad too unforgiving here. Beyond this, you had plenty of home conversions for all of the big and small systems. The Atari 2600 release technically does what it should, but barely, struggling to capture the magic of the arcade with a flickering screen and enemies that are nothing more than spinning squares. It's safe to say that it wasn't exactly a prime cut. Thankfully, the Intellivision version that was programmed by Ray Kaestner was significantly better and, to many, may just be the very best game on the Intellivision. Ray was given the project at the beginning of September 1982 and attempted to complete the game from scratch before he got married the week before Christmas. Officials at the company were ecstatic with this plan, as they could potentially release the game in time for the holidays. Thankfully for them, not only was Ray able to achieve this unrealistic goal, but he did it ahead of schedule, which allowed him to fine-tune the game and make it the classic port that all Intellivision fans would soon love to own. He really did cook up something special here. In fact, this version of the game was so good that Ray ended up playing it on his wedding day with his groomsmen. It's also worth pointing out that a lot of the popularity for the game on this system specifically was due to Mattel Electronics, who had purchased a significant amount of advertising to promote their Aquarius home computer, which also got a port. However, due to the system being a failure pretty much out of the gate, Mattel shifted a lot of that advertising space to promote this game specifically, eventually focusing entirely on their Intellivision port. And yes, that was where that now iconic line came from, this BurgerTime advert.
We are closed now.
And as this was the video game crash year of 1983, that was a line that a whole heap of the American gaming industry would soon be repeating. BurgerTime continued to be released on a variety of different systems and still does to this day, with Blaze soon to be releasing handheld renditions and Numskull releasing the quarter arcade version. I suppose you could say that it's a game that most definitely stood the test of time. As in the herb time? Come on! And yes, Numskull was kind enough to send me their quarter arcade cabinet, and similar to all of their previous arcade machine replicas, it's perfect. I mean, come on, the emulation on a game this old has been perfect for the longest time, and besides owning the original arcade machine, this is probably the best you will ever get. And no, this isn't a sponsored video, but I do have an affiliate link down below if you fancy grabbing one yourself. It really is quite stunning. Right, I think that's quite enough time spent on that original game now, the absolute best of the bunch, yeah? Yeah, not to ruin the rest of this history piece already, but that original game was just simply perfect, and like many arcade games for the time, everything that came after it, every port, every sequel, every spin-off, fell under the shadow of perfection. But with that said, you have got to give the sequel some credit, as almost all of them changed up the recipe, although sadly most of them did it way more than they perhaps should have done. Peter Pepper's Ice Cream Factory sees our hero give up the nightmare-inducing and health inspector visiting burger kitchen as he opens up an equally frightening ice cream parlour that requires you to push giant scoops of ice cream onto giant ice cream cones. At its core, it's still BurgerTime, I suppose, but for many, it changed up the formula way too much. No longer can you press the ingredients down multiple levels, but now, similar to Boulder Dash, your character can roll the ice cream scoops over enemies. And the super skilled can even throw the scoops up a level diagonally to defeat them too. On top of this, the game has a hint of Load Runner included, as the holes in the ground where the ice cream scoops fall need to be dodged. The problem is, as perfectly okay as this game is, it just makes you want to go back and play the original BurgerTime. And Boulder Dash and Load Runner for that matter. In a super strange twist to the formula, our psychotic chef has also gained the ability to jump in this game, making it far more frantic than the game that came before it. Look, again, as perfectly okay as this game is, it loses its simple yet addictive charm that made the original so great. It may be ice cream instead of burgers, but it's nowhere near as sweet as the original. There is still fun to be had here, but in hindsight, I think I would have just preferred more levels, a Ms. BurgerTime if you will. The same gameplay style as before, but hey, maybe with different foods. Like, I don't know, a pizza perhaps. Which brilliantly brings us back to the home computers. You see, that original game was still doing serious numbers on the Intellivision, and Mattel, who had the rights to release the game on that system, decided to make a sequel of their own, which they did, and that game was called Pizza Time. But sadly, it was a bit of a half-baked idea, as it didn't get very far into production before Mattel gave up on it, as well as a sequel to Masters of the Universe. Now, even though that Pizza Time game didn't get made, the Masters of the Universe sequel did. And the reason I'm bringing that up for this video is simply because BurgerTime was so popular on the Intellivision that they decided to sprite swap the He-Man sequel for yet another BurgerTime spin-off called Dinner. However, unfortunately, the game shares far more similarities to the ice cream factory than it does with the original game. Technically, it's very impressive, but honestly, you don't really feel the need to continue playing it after a few levels. It's missing that secret ingredient that made the original so addictive. In the game, the fast food gang is back, chasing down Peter Pepper in a pseudo 3D single screen game that requires you to kick mozzarella balls down to the plate at the bottom of the screen. And again, just like the ice cream spin-off, the more enemies you kill along the way, the more points you get. Now, thankfully, the very next title was a true return to form. Data East decided to have another crack at the BurgerTime formula, and they ended up creating one of the absolute best sequels of the bunch. Super BurgerTime was released in 1990 and saw you play as Peter Pepper Jr. in a typical for the time cutesy version of the original. And as you are not as large as your dad in this game, you need to jump multiple times on the ingredients in order for them to drop down, which I personally do not prefer, but it definitely doesn't stop me wanting to continue playing this brilliant sequel. Essentially, it's the same meal, but prepared a different way. This release also offers two-player gaming, scrolling stages, a variety of new enemies and weapons which are great fun to experiment with, and best of all, the game also offers boss battles. Seriously, this is a genuine pleasure to play. Not as simple and addictive as the original, but still a perfect follow-up to the classic, especially if you plan to play in multiplayer. It's a feast for all and a great starter for anyone wanting to dig their teeth into this franchise. Although, if you want the absolute best sequel, then the very next game, BurgerTime Deluxe, may be the one for you. BurgerTime Deluxe for the OG Game Boy is a great blend between both the original and Super BurgerTime. With its scrolling level layout, it's the perfect treat for handheld gamers who obviously loved it, because just like the NES original, this too got released twice under different publishing houses. All in all, it's a much simpler game than the original or Super BurgerTime. It's far more puzzle heavy this time around, and to the right sort of gamer, that may make this the absolute best of the series. Similar to what the Game Boy did with Donkey Kong, Data East added just enough to make this the perfect little handheld sequel that still to this day hasn't been beaten. It's the creme de la creme of BurgerTime follow-ups, if you will. All the added extras you've come to expect are present here, from passwords every few stages, little animations between those stages, power-ups, continues, new pathways that are going to open up when you meet certain objectives. It really is a perfect little game for such a small handheld, and for anyone that had it at the time, I'm sure it filled a hole during those long journeys. And that, ladies and gentlemen, was it for a whole 18 years. Sure, we got the Flintstones ripoff that came in the year 2000 for the Game Boy Color, which I suppose may be an official sequel. Honestly, who knows? No mention of Data East's original can be found anywhere on the box or the manual, so yes, this may be a ripoff, but it also may be a spin-off too. A very pretty looking game that captures the feel of the TV show perfectly, with a soundtrack that has no place being as good as it is. Sadly though, it's the gameplay that isn't anywhere near as good as the Game Boy original that it is obviously trying to copy. Your hitbox is stupidly big, not good for a game that requires you to wait until the last minute to run off your burger patty. And on top of that, the technique of dropping 2 levels at once when the enemy is on top has been removed here. Look, it's not a terrible spin-off, But if it wasn't for the Flintstones licensing, it would be completely forgettable. Hardcore BurgerTime fans got the game as part of the Arachi Game Center PS2 series, where it got its own release, which came with a mini CD soundtrack featuring all of the bleeps and bloops you've come to expect from the arcade original, and a DVD long play that shows an expert playing the original title. But when it comes down to true, definite BurgerTime sequels, we didn't get another one of those until 2009, with the confusingly titled BurgerTime Deluxe. Again. Now, BurgerTime Deluxe brought the series back from the dead as Namco had a go at releasing a version of the game for PC. And like all casual real arcade styled games for the time, I mean, it was fine, but wasn't exactly breaking any ground either. All the characters, including newcomers Captain Pepper, Vinny Vinegar and token female Sally Salt, all look perfectly 2009. Cheap, forgettable, pre-rendered gumph. Almost as if the game was designed to be cheap and forgettable from the outset. Technically, it's not all that bad at all. It does what it should, and it even expands on the original by giving still screen storyboard slides and significantly bigger stages to boot. Unfortunately, by adding all of this, they have in fact taken more away from the core design, as the game is significantly easier with fewer chances to get trapped if you don't plan ahead. Add all of this with the stupidly big and quite frankly boring stages, and the end result is simply dull. BurgerTime Deluxe is a boring game. Whatever you do, do not compare it with the Game Boy version, which weirdly is actually one of the best in the series. Which brings us to BurgerTime World Tour, which was the franchise's one and only trip to the wild and mostly forgettable world of early Xbox Live arcade renditions. PlayStation and Wii versions also existed. But unlike most of the arcade revamps that we saw at the time, this one is one of the most forgettable. Look, again, it's not terrible, in fact it's more than playable. Konami this time created a game that did what it should. It replicated classic BurgerTime in multiple 3D cylinder-like stages. The problem was, again, they didn't know when to stop adding stuff. Besides the fact that Peter Pepper looks absolutely horrendous in this game, you now have multiple ways to kill enemies, and even your classic pepper spray seems to have some kind of constant refill attachment to it, making it genuinely quite hard to run out. But worst of all is the reintroduction of the jump button. World Tour is far more platform heavy than any game that came before it. With moving platforms and what have you, the added jump button actually does make sense. With that said, it also makes the game stupidly easy, as the overly dumb AI enemies are easier to dodge now than ever before, making what could have been a pretty decent change up, again, a bit of a dull experience. Thankfully, the inclusion of bosses adds some much needed flair to the formula, but again, you're hardly ever going to need to retry any particular boss battle, as it simply is just way too easy. It's not bad, it actually does add some pretty decent extras, but I just wish that it didn't. Which finally brings us to BurgerTime Party for the Nintendo Switch, which is currently the final game in the BurgerTime franchise. As a family of 4, this is the version that we have played the most. And for good reason. It's not as hard as the original arcade version, it's far more of a puzzle game similar to the Game Boy release, I suppose. And it has a great fun for all ages feel about it when played in multiplayer, as you can all work together to complete these huge stages. Of course, this makes it feel quite a bit different than the original, but in this instance, I'm perfectly fine with that. Look, sequels should add extras, and that's what this game does without breaking the original design. When looking at the single player mode, it's hard to believe that this never came out on mobile phones. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if at one point it was supposed to. All of the characters feel like new age typical mobile characters with their flash animation art style, and all of the levels, which again now have a more puzzle driven way of completing them, are completed with you getting a star ranking out of 3 at the end of each stage. Again, like many of the sequels before it, this is a different game. It's more of a puzzle game with a bit of that arcade goodness sprinkled in, so your mileage may vary. Thankfully, where the game shines is in its multiplayer. Being able to play a super basic game with the whole family on the same screen is a great way of introducing the original formula to a new age audience. And it at least proves to me that this gameplay mechanic stands the test of time, as both my kids have enjoyed it so much that they've gotten quite good at playing that new quarter arcade machine that I got. The only problem with the multiplayer is that it does feel a little tacked on. Again, as if this was originally supposed to be a mobile game ported to the Switch before release. Working together or shouting at each other to complete stages does what it should, and it does it well. It's frantic, it's funny, and it works for all ages, but it doesn't add enough to make it a game that you'll want to complete 100%. And the mode where you get to choose between being Peter Pepper or the evil ingredients, chasing down your friends and family sounds great on paper, but like an old burger left on the floor for all to tread on, it becomes old and stale after only 1 or 2 attempts. With all that said, BurgerTime Party may just be the perfect way to introduce people to the simple yet brilliantly addictive world of the original BurgerTime. A classic arcade game that has undoubtedly stood the test of time. A series I will always go back and play, and a series that, just like the majority of classic arcade games, was perfected on its very first release. As stated at the beginning of this journey, very few games get that seal of perfect gaming approval. But if you ask me, Peter Pepper should be a character that goes right alongside the best of that golden age arcade era.
We are closed now.
Hey there guys, thanks for checking out BurgerTime, The Complete History. And like I said guys, this is not a sponsored video, however they did send me this rather incredible quarter arcade cabinet, which is the 10th one I own now. Yeah, obviously I absolutely love this thing. Oh, it's so good. It's not a sponsored video, but if you did want to support the channel, I've managed to get hold of an affiliate link. You can go and check that out down below and sign up and get any of the quarter arcades. Well, I will say this one, and I'm a big fan of Space Invaders, big fan of Space Invaders, and Galaxian is one of my favourite games from the old classic arcades. Go and get one of those, but yeah, BurgerTime is really quite something. You can go and check that out by using that affiliate link below and supporting the channel. Now, this is the part of the video where I'd like to give a massive shout out to all of my supporters, all of my patrons, all of my YouTube members that not only got to see this video early, but they got to see a whole heap of videos early. Some videos that will never ever get released. You get exclusive versions of some of my videos, and there's so much more in the exclusive Slopes Game Room password zone that you can only get access to if you are a supporter of the show. So thank you to all of the following supporters: Chris, aka Brackmang, Robert Ramsey, Proto Rock Hades, British video game nerd, Keiju Samurai 1985, Boots and Pup, The Sneaky Ferret, Vitas Varnes, James, The Action Saxon, Jay is Manchild, Mike Fallon, Nicholas Burtner, Chev Madik, Jabba Al Aiden, Richard Alderjic, Shadow Dragon, Dina, Ye Old Hamburglar, Jeff Mianowski, Bram Perez, Conrad Constantine, Andrew Dalton, Retro to Next Gen, aka Lou, Paul Float, Ryan Burford, Deracuda, Vike Echo, Winning at Self-Defeat, JM, Sir Nilsson, Akatimo84, Ian Quell, Arista, Dina81, and Mind of the Unsane. Thank you guys so much. If you want to support the show, like I said, get all of those perks, get your name down below, and everything else that comes with becoming a supporter of the show, becoming a game room squatter, as I like to call them, then please do check those links below and support the show, or get yourself a quarter arcade, because that helps as well. And this is really quite an awesome piece of kit. Really do like this. So this is DJ Slope signing out. Thank you guys for supporting the show. We've got plenty more videos coming up, and until next time, this is DJ Slope signing out, and hopefully I'll see you all next time. Bye bye.